Connected Consumer.
Hi, my name is Rosie Sarah, and I'm one of the hosts of Parks Associates podcast, The Connected Consumer. For those of you that are new, welcome. This podcast is all about Parks Associates' data-driven market insights on emerging consumer technology products and services. It also features our talented research analyst team and other industry leaders bringing in new and innovative products to market. So in this episode, we're taking a different direction from our usual format. We're going to be listening in to an interactive panel from our special roundtable session at our Connections Executive Conference. It was moderated by our very own research director and wonderful podcast co-host, Chris White. For those of you that don't know Chris, Chris covers the smart home and smart energy markets, and his background in market research and data gathering contribute to the design of Parks Associates consumer surveys that go out to about 10,000 internet households. Before we go into the special session, let me give you a quick overview of the event. So Connections is the only connected home event to focus on the use cases and emerging business models that will successfully engage consumers and grow revenues in the converging IoT industries. So the panel topic is hardware as a service, and it spotlights leaders pioneering the hardware as a service business model. The voices you'll hear come from Terry Anderton, founder and CEO of WAGS, Rebecca Belding, VP of Silicon Valley Bank, Tom Klein, Senior Director, IoT Business Development at DigiCert, and Bob Langlois, founder of Water Control Management.
Today we have a couple of speakers, great panel of innovators from a couple of different areas. And I'm excited to talk to them because I feel like a lot of times in the smart home space, we talk about the same kind of 5 or 8 categories a little bit too much. We talk about the tech giants a little bit too much. And really there's a lot of interesting things happening in other device categories and in the services and value chain providers going on around us. So I want to go ahead and bring in my first panelist now. Now, Terry Anderton is the founder and CEO of WAGS. It's a very interesting company making pet devices. Terry, thank you for joining us today.
I really appreciate it, Chris. Happy to participate and looking forward to it.
And kind of help intro yourself to the audience.
Sure. My name is Terry Anderton. I am the CEO and founder of WAGS. We are we live in the pet space. We make smart connected pet products, and it's a huge space. About 60% of all U.S. households have a pet. And when I got into this business, I was shocked to see that not many, the level of innovation in the space was very low. So we've created a set of highly disruptive products that allow you to create, for instance, geofences for your pet. We don't use shock. We can contain your pet, kind of keep you connected with your pet at all times. And there's just a ton of opportunity in this space, and we're excited to kind of be on the forefront of developing it. The latest thing is I think a $25 billion space by the year 2025. So we've been growing very quickly, and the space is maturing rapidly.
That's very cool. Thanks, Terry, for being here. He's got a lot of interesting tech going into these little devices, and look forward to hearing his point of view on some other things happening in the industry. All right, we also have Rebecca Belding. She's the VP of Silicon Valley Bank. They are doing some interesting things in terms of who they're working with in technology space. So I'm excited to have Rebecca here. Rebecca, thanks for joining us. And also, could you please tell us a little bit about Silicon Valley Bank?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Belding, based here in San Francisco, California. I'm a vice president at Silicon Valley Bank in our commercial banking division. So Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB, is a bank that serves the technology ecosystem. We've been working with founders and venture capital firms for 40 years and bank over 50% of the VC-backed technology companies. We have offices all over the world and across the United States, and our teams are divided up by subsector focused. So I work with clients in our hardware space that have physical products. So covering everything from semiconductors to connected home, consumer electronics, robotics, IoT devices. And, over the years, our team has witnessed the emergence of the hardware as a service business model, which has been great in so many ways for companies. However, we also recognize that this new age model creates new financing challenges. Customers aren't collecting that large one-time payment, or rather they're recognizing the hardware payback over months or maybe even years. So SVB created this hardware as a service financing product with the intention to help clients finance the upfront CapEx and help repay your loan as you collect money from your customers. So we've been doing HOS financing since about 2017, and also closely kind of tracking the metrics and insights most important to hardware companies and investors. So really looking forward to the discussion today and diving into some more detail. So thanks for including me.
Okay, thanks for being here. Next, we have Tom Klein, he's the Senior Director of IoT Business Development at DigiCert. Tom, will you tell us a little bit about what DigiCert does? And also, thanks for being here.
Yeah, you bet. So good evening or good afternoon, everyone. It's good evening for me. My name is Tom Klein. I work with DigiCert in the IoT space and in the home space specifically. DigiCert is an organization that specializes in digital trust. What is that? Almost every single one of you that have enjoyed this presentation today has interacted with our technology today. We are the backbone of providing security over the internet through TLS connections. We do it both public and private to the tune of about 28 billion transactions per day that we help secure. And part of the initiatives that we are working on right now, we'll talk a little bit more, but are around the Matter initiatives for home automation. And I'll share a little bit about that with you here in just a little bit.
All right. Also, next we have Bob Langlois. He's the founder of Water Control Management. Bob, thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, Chris, thanks very much. Water Control Management is an advisory and project implementation company. And essentially, we're focused at the multifamily space and trying to help our clients be smarter about the water that they use. And our primary mode of operandi is to use technology levers to better understand how the water is being used in a building, use IoT tools and AI support to become predictive on what we're seeing in usage, and then ultimately put smart solutions in place that end up with less water consumption, lower cost for the building. And our primary way of supporting clients in this regard as a hardware as a service participant is that we are fronting the cost of the installations in exchange for a long-term service agreement where we are incentivized or paid based upon a share of the savings that we generate. So it's ideally it's a win-win, and it forces us to be very prudent on where we're spending our money to support our clients.
All right, that's great. So it's great that you guys were all able to come today. I wanted to start to kind of touch on a little bit some of the new models and the new angles that you guys are looking at. And I think it makes sense to start with Rebecca here, because she mentioned hardware as a service as kind of her area of expertise. Now, Rebecca, you mentioned that you guys started kind of targeting this group in 2017. I definitely see how it makes sense from the consumer perspective in terms of, not consumer, I guess, your vendor, client, partner, whatever you want to say, why people would borrow money from you in this space and work with you for financing. But what kind of attracted you guys to that group?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we kind of started to see this emergence of a new kind of revenue model. So shifting from that one-time hardware sales model to a recurring revenue model. And, this makes sense for a number of reasons from a client perspective. It kind of borrows that SaaS model where you get that repeatable, sticky revenue with lots of contracts. But obviously that creates, a financing need, because customers are still fronting that upfront CapEx and BOM cost. And instead of collecting a one-time payment from your clients, you're now getting paid back over months or over years. So SVB works with a lot of different HOS companies, and we recognize this kind of financing need and this kind of cash conversion from a working capital cycle. So we kind of tapped our enterprise colleagues who have been doing, subscription software lending for a while, and kind of used that as a basis to develop this hardware as a service kind of lending model. And, over the years, we've been tracking kind of the metrics that matter kind of the most, and thinking about things like their payback on the hardware, your lifetime value, and other things. And, I think kind of looking into my crystal ball, we're just going to continue to see the emergence of more HOS financing as more and more hardware companies kind of shift to this hardware as a service model.
Yeah, so you guys kind of identified a need and a emerging strategy there that is now something we hear a lot about. A lot of people who are in the device sales kind of space, the one-time revenue model, are looking for ways to add services and things like that. So it seems like you guys were very prescient in terms of moving into that in 17. Now, another group that was very prescient in realizing that digital trust was going to be a big issue. Tom, can you talk a little bit about how DigiCert kind of identified that need, and particularly how you guys kind of moved in and were able to, gain a whole bunch of business and prominence in terms of working with smart home on that
Sure.
area?
Glad to. So the Connectivity Standards Alliance, or CSA, has been working for a couple of years at trying to normalize connectivity inside the home. And they've had a lot of great partners over the last couple of years. So if you think of automated attendants in the home today, you think of Siri, Google, and Alexa as being that point. And many devices that you all use in your homes today work with one of them, but they really don't interoperate today. Apple has proprietary language, as does some of the others, that says, hey, I can work with a Ring doorbell, but how do I get Apple to work with my garage door opener and other pieces? And so the CSA has been working on this, and it's just recently announced, which is why it's dark here. I'm in Amsterdam at the CSA member meeting. They announced about 2 weeks ago that the Matter standard was available. And the intent of the Matter standard was to be able to have devices within the home work to a common standard of interoperability. So communication layers, connectivity layers are all there to be able to say, if I program my device to this standard, then it will work with all other devices inside of the ecosystem, or at least communicate with them. And on top of that layer is a security layer. There is a digital certificate, a device attestation certificate, that allows these devices to know that they are authentic, that they are a member of the Matter community, and they all work together. So that whether you are using any of the automated attendants, any of the control panels that you might see inside of a home, working with a variety of devices, which are doorbells and locks and garage door openers and HVAC and other devices, that allow all of these to come together and work in a seamless fashion. The first version of this standard is out. There are a number of members that are working on this. If you're interested in seeing the membership and who this works across, you can go to csa-iot.org and see what the CSA is all about from a device in the home standpoint. And then our role is to work with those that choose to work with us in providing security and authentication that is non-reputable.
Yeah, so you recognize a big trend and a big need in the space. Interoperability is something we talk about all the time, and there's definitely been all sorts of barriers to creating it on both the business side and the tech side. But consumers really stand to benefit. The more Matter is successful, the more we'll all be able to use our devices together in a more seamless manner. So that's going to be a really big deal for the space.
Yeah, the one thing, just real quick, the one thing I'd say if you're trying to wrap your head around that is a plug and play device. If you used to have a Windows computer and you said, hey, I want to go buy a mouse or a keyboard or a camera, there was a day when you actually had to have a diskette that said, oh, geez, I got to figure out what my drivers are, so on and so forth. Now you go get a plug and play device and it just works. The Matter logo and the Matter standard is going to allow that to happen as well.
I'd like to pretend that I didn't understand that example, but this right here will let you know that it's real. I've lived that life of trying to get my mouse working so that I could play Oregon Trail or whatever I was trying to do. But okay, so speaking of like a big diversity of devices and choices being made therein, Now, Terry, you talked about how you work in the pet space, putting your emphasis on WAGs, but you've also been in the game for a minute, and you have a whole bunch of manufacturing and other stuff going on. So talk a little bit about why WAGs was really kind of something that you pushed passionately, and I mean, other than because pets are cute and cool. More of a business answer is what I'm looking for here. I should have asked the question more specifically. But also the reason, like, why it was difficult to start being emerging, business in a new space and kind of creating your own category. Could you really talk about like the challenges behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. I had sold a company. Historically, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I had a security software company, sold it to Intel, and wanted to get my kids a dog. And about a month after we got the dog ran away, and my kids were devastated. We finally found her, and I promised them it would never happen again. So I went into the big box stores, and I was shocked to find that really there was no innovation. They were still burying wires in the ground and using shock collars and things that have been around for 25 years. So I really took an interest in the space, realized it was huge, $100 billion space. There's over 100 million dogs in the US. And when I looked at what was driving the growth in the industry, it's a lot of younger people, Gen Z, millennials, and they use they're digital natives, and yet there was no technology in the space. So we set out to build from a piece of paper a brand new product that was satellite based. Used all the modern wireless technologies to create a solution that worked for us, but also we felt worked for the general population. And out of the gate, we realized we had to create a brand, because in the pet industry, as big as it is, it's over $100 billion industry. Most people don't know any of the brands outside of the food aisle. Most people have heard of Purina or whoever, but not too many brands in the rest of the store. And so we felt there was a great opportunity to establish almost like a Ring.com or a Nest.com in the pet space. And so we built a strategy we called the Connected Home for Pets, and really kind of take over where Ring and Nest leave off. They don't address the pet, and huge opportunity. So creating that new category was difficult, but now it's being covered by most analysts. The space is being recognized as the fastest growing part of the pet industry, and so hopefully I addressed the question satisfactorily.
Yeah, so you weren't just the nerdy dad that was going to try and be helpful. You realized there was a business opportunity after you saw such a big gap.
Absolutely. And to Rebecca, Rebecca's offering, one of the challenges in our space, we're using cellular-based connectivity. So there's a recurring revenue model with our product. The legacy products, were just a transactional model. You buried wires in the ground, you bought the product, and that was it. Had to have somebody come to your house to install it. So this is kind of new, where it's almost really a cell phone for a dog. It has all the same connectivity features and operates much like a cell phone with an app, and it allows you to stay connected. So I'm very intrigued by what Rebecca's doing. We want to lower the barrier of entry for our customers. We're growing very quickly, and we do see, there is a segment of the population that doesn't want to spend $300 or $400 on a product. They'd rather pay $25 a month or $20 a month. So that's a really excellent solution there.
Right. So, Bob, so similarly, I think if I understand your story a little bit, you also identified a gap in terms of knowledge and information that clients had around water, which is something that is important but kind of under discussed, I think, outside of just preventing leaks. There's also other aspects to water that has all sorts of implications in energy. So could you talk a little bit about how you kind of identified the opportunity to bring some expertise to water?
Yeah, so my background before I got into the water space was in property valuation and essentially challenging the valuations that the government placed on real property to lower the property taxes. And so my pivot to water 4 or 5 years ago I was looking at situations where the cost of that water was escalating and the cost of the water was not something that was passed on to a tenant. So in the large multifamily rental apartment sector, it's the landlord that picks up the water bill, and there's no way to manage the behavior of the tenants that are using the water because they're not paying for it. And so we started to sort of migrate from a situation where the owner would get a water bill once every 30 or 60 days. And if there were usage problems, he was looking in the rearview mirror, and sort of played around and found some solutions in the marketplace that are IoT based and measure that consumption down to the minute, hour, day, and that information becomes predictive in nature. And so it can alert and notify. And so we started by providing information through a monitoring service, and then the market came back to us and said, the information's great, but what do we do with it to put it into effect? And so we added a service layer that had us essentially providing recommendations and implementing conservation steps to reduce how much water they use and or prevent issues from arising in the first place. And so started with data that gave the owners insight that was previously missing. And in a large part, based upon how the assets are owned and managed, it's unfortunate, but they don't trust their own people to act on the information. And so the market was saying, great data, can you do something with the data to help us? And so that's where we sort of go the last mile and are doing actual work in the buildings to solve those problems. And the other element was it's an old industry, not very welcoming to innovation and very used to stable expenses, collect the rent, and it's a very traditional model. In today's world, particularly in the large market where we're in, there are restrictions on revenue, meaning the landlords have government regulation on how much they can increase the rent. So in today's environment with inflationary costs of 8 or 9% year over year, they can only raise the rent 2.5%. So they've got big portfolios and they need to focus on expense reduction, and water for a variety of reasons is going up in cost. And so the market has really raised their hand and saying, this is where we want help. But not being very innovative or accepting of technology in general, the real estate sector, it's been slow. Everyone sort of is in a position where they want to be first to be second. So I believed in the technology and I believed what the insight could provide in terms of results. So we developed a model where we put in our own money into our clients' buildings in exchange for a service agreement. So generally they're 7 to 8 years in duration, and we're responsible for essentially delivering efficiencies in the water, and we get paid based upon the savings that we realize from those efficiencies.
Right. So the market kind of pulled you into this position where now you're adding value based on your own expertise, which changes your revenue model, to your point earlier, but also in a way creates kind of a moat around your business, which is important whenever you're kind of moving into a new space. You'd be able to argue that you can protect yourself. So could you so I'm going to stick with you for a second here, Bob, and just kind of ask, can you talk a little bit about how you use your kind of advisory skills and the power of Bob, like we're selling Bob a little bit along with devices and the brand, to kind of keep imitators and competitors at bay?
Yeah, so the interesting part in terms of initially engaging with that new customer or client is the willingness to co-invest with them, or be a leader in helping solve the problem. And so in that particular context, there's no stronger testament of your desire to help than putting your money where your mouth is. So that's been a big driver. I haven't seen anyone in the marketplace yet that's emulated that or sought to do it. They're all still on a traditional time and materials model where they'll come in and spend the owner's money and expect the cost benefit to sort of be delivered on a trust me basis, as opposed to we're measured in 30-day increments on the value that we deliver. And so the whole notion of co-investing and sort of being a leader and providing a solution that didn't exist before is sort of what is how we're sort of playing defense. There are other people in the market that do what they do, what we do, but they just don't do it in the same revenue pretext. And that's currently helping our growth quite a bit. And then it forces us to be the guinea pig for what IoT and hardware solutions can be tested, should be tested, and deployed in the marketplace to generate the greatest results.
I appreciate, Bob, that was a really humble answer. I feel like I set you up to be like, yes, you should choose us over competitors because I'm the best. And instead you gave actual business reasons. So that's better for the audience, but also very humble. It's nice for you. Thanks for doing that. So Tom,
Thank
I
you.
wanted to ask you too. So you guys have kind of a little bit of a different perspective, I think, where you're establishing a place and maybe you feel differently about competitors. I feel like when we've talked in the past, you've been kind of happy with the idea of more attention being brought to trust to the software space. Is that fair to say that rather than trying to kind of occupy the space by yourself, you'd rather just kind of grow the pie in general? Was Tom frozen or thoughtful? I can't tell. You're frozen. Okay.
I think
Okay,
it's
well-
sorry. Are we back?
Oh, there you are.
Are we
Hi.
back? Yeah.
I thought you were
Sorry
listening
about that.
very
That might have
closely to
been-
my very clever question, and instead you were frozen. But thanks,
Fine.
you're back. Did you hear
No,
what I
no,
asked?
I heard you. I locked up here. I
Okay.
apologize. Again, I'm remote in another part of the world, but we're
Stop
okay.
bragging about being in
Um,
Amsterdam. We get it, Tom.
Yeah.
You're cooler than us.
So it really, there's a number of good security companies out there that do a variety of things at different layers in what happens inside the marketplace. And we think it's a good thing for consumers to feel that there is trust inside their devices, that manufacturers are working together on some common places. And I think one of the trends that you're going to see, we see it very heavily in Europe and in other areas, is that there's regulatory functions that are driving security and privacy. And so there's a very active participation for security providers such as ourselves, or trust providers such as ourselves, the government, utilities, manufacturers, OEMs, and in different places they have different rules. And so being able to provide this, I think, granularly helps the industry out as a whole. It's a higher level of trust, whether you're taking care of your own water supply or taking care of your own pup. You want to be able to know that those things are within your control. And so as a result, I think high tide lifts all boats, and it's good to have folks that are challenging each other inside of that space to make a better product for the consumer and a better product for the community. And we're good with that. And it's why we invest times not just in what we do and the technology we use, but in standards boards that are setting some of this. And we're saying, hey, we think a really good bar is here. Often when a product comes to market, it's a little bit lower because everybody's trying to catch up. But we do want to set that high bar and then continue to press on that.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's going to be really important, as this space continues to grow for people to be doing that work. So I appreciate you guys are working to build that space. So
That's what we
Terry,
do.
you guys are also working to build a space, but that does mean that you're working to get investments. You're pitching retail on new technology that maybe they're not familiar with, and that's not always going to be the easiest experience. Could you talk a little bit about your kind of experience working either up or down the chain, working with competitors or partners in terms of trying to grow the connected pet space?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a high level of interest in kind of connected pet right now, and most of the retailers, most of the large companies such as Petco, PetSmart, Target, obviously Amazon, Chewy, they're all super interested in this space. The challenge is that the buyers inside those organizations are used to buying, leather goods, nylon, and other pet products that come with a much higher margin. And buying a technology product is a completely different animal. And so there's a lot of maturity that has to happen within that retail channel to be very successful. We're finding greater success through the mobile carrier channel because they're accustomed to selling data plans and this type of product.
That's really interesting.
The other, issue obviously within kind of bricks and mortar retail is that, oftentimes they're understaffed. They don't really they have a glass case over in the corner with all the expensive electronic stuff in it. And, somebody's got to find the key. So it's not always the best environment. So our business works really well direct to consumer through our own website, through our own channel, as well as through mobile carriers or Amazon and some of the companies that are used to selling this type of product. And as far as the competitive landscape goes, this market started off with basic GPS tracking. So there's a lot of companies that's what they focus on. My dog is lost. We wanted to take it to a different place, which is we wanted to actually contain the pet. One of the biggest drivers in our industry is people are concerned, given the short lifespan of a pet, that they want to make sure the dog or cat lives as long as possible and is healthy. And over 10% of the dogs go missing or get hit by a car every year. So we focused on the containment aspect of this, and that market was primarily, like the Invisible Fence Company, more legacy, older technology. And we've found other people kind of copying us at this point and trying to get into the market, but they don't spend the time and effort on their software or the back end, and that's really crucial. So there's, for instance, some Chinese products that are coming into the market, but when you open up the apps, they're not good, and the back end isn't good. So so far, we've really established ourselves as the leader in the space.
So Rebecca, you have an interesting position here because you're kind of charged with, identifying the best opportunities when sometimes you can't know tactically which is going to be, the better product under the covers. Like Terry's describing some bad devices that he comes across in his space, but you guys can't necessarily, you don't have a drawer full of gadgets that you play with to find out which one you think is going to be the best, and that's how you decide, right? You have to use more sophisticated processes than that, but it also creates a challenge. So I'm curious if you could talk about kind of how you evaluate opportunities in the market a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. And I think one of the things I mentioned in the introduction is how SCB is kind of subsector focused. And I think personally focusing just on hardware companies and connected homes and semiconductors really helps you narrow down your focus, because as a generalist banker, I do not know which dog collar is the best, but getting more expertise and ingraining in a certain subsector really does help that. And then, another thing that I think is pretty interesting is, every day we're seeing more and more entrants into every space, which really does force companies to differentiate in other ways, including their business model. So something that I think is interesting is we're seeing a lot of companies turn to the data that they mine to create new revenue streams. And we're also kind of really starting to see hardware break out from conventional realm into really new and exciting applications. So really focusing on that data to create potential new revenue sources in the future is something that we've been pretty focused on from like the hardware as a service lens. And then the other thing is just on the metrics side, really drilling into like the contracts, the payback, the lifetime value, and kind of the churn are kind of universal metrics that help us as kind of bankers have a, baseline understanding of the different technologies out there.
Yeah, that's cool. And that ties in nicely to one of our questions from the audience. So you mentioned the kind of monetizing the data that the devices are capturing, but that does always raise privacy issues, right? So I see a question from the audience says, how can you, so what is the role of security and privacy as it relates to partnerships specifically? So not thinking about the clients, but thinking about the partnerships that you're engaging in. Is there someone who can address that? Tom is talking on mute and also lagging a little bit from Europe.
Sorry about that. I put myself on mute. So part of that is some true fundamental pieces of, hey, let's make sure that data is encrypted when it's moving over an open wire, and data files that are on devices are secure. That feels like security 101. What's more interesting is the regulatory responsibilities that are being driven down that says, here's what has to happen with financial data. Here's what has to happen with financial data in this country. And in order to do that, systems have to be designed with some granularity and some mechanism to provide that security. And it can be complicated. It should be a standard moving forward, which is why some of these standards bodies are bringing security companies like us or trust companies like us into the device manufacturing process, because it's more than just simple data. These are complex devices. Turning on your lights on and off are one thing, but if you said, "Hey Siri, how is my daughter's glucose?" Because her glucose monitor, being a diabetic child, is communicating to the in-house Wi-Fi. You want to be able to do that. And oh, by the way, based on the glucose monitor, the insulin pump that's also attached to her is going to provide some therapy on the fly. Now, the level of concern goes up dramatically when it's, can somebody hack my daughter's infusion pump on the fly and give her a dose of insulin? So these things start to stack up based on the types of devices, the criticality of what they do. For all of these purposes, there is a big, and in my opinion, and I'm in the field, there is a big emphasis on security. It's not just private data, it's the activities that these devices do for you today.
So Bob, I'd like to kind of pose this question to you too as well, because you make decisions for your clients in terms of what devices you're putting in place. And as you mentioned, you're responsible for them on a deeper level. So could you talk a little bit about how you make decisions around privacy and security of those devices integrating, and then also maybe just talk about the challenges of finding devices that work together and making that happen?
Yeah, so the large majority of the hardware that I deal with, recommend, and implement is coming from OEMs. And in fairness, as a implementer, reseller, VAR of most of this stuff, the extent of my concern or my client's concern with data integrity really is just me properly representing what are the inherent policies or practices that the original OEM has. For the most part, they're accessing the information on the OEM's platform. If they're API feeds, that's dealing direct with the OEM and the support. So from my business model, I'm insulating myself a little bit from that. I do run into a situation where I have multiple hardware from multiple vendors with different platforms in the same building. A lot of what I've been able to couch with my business is I don't have the end consumer interfacing with that platform other than in the form of alerts and notifications. So the large majority of balancing different systems and different platforms and different data feeds, we're able to shield from the client because at the end of the day, the client doesn't really care about the user experience or the interface. They're really just paying us for results. So it's not a matter if the goal gets scored off the guy's shin pad and in the back of the net, it's just how many goals you score. And so we've really catered our delivery to that. And the one advantage from my competitors is they're all married to one piece of hardware. And so as we come in as a VAR or a reseller, I've got a large laundry list or smorgasbord of options that I can offer to them. And that's continued to help keep the mold around what it is that we offer. So that people on an expensive budget can have full turnkey, and people that just want the bare basics also have options there.
Yeah, that's cool. So one of the services you're providing essentially is protecting is kind of shielding the user base from the pain of dealing with the integration challenges and stuff. So Terry, I wanted to kind of go to you and talk about integration a little bit too, because you've built kind of a little ecosystem, right, through your various SKUs that you could have a single pet that has a whole bunch of different WAGS products serving them hypothetically, but you're also selling into brownfields in the sense that there are people that have existing smart home devices and maybe they're already trying to use their cameras and video doorbells and things like that to kind of track their pets to a certain degree. I could see there being interest in people kind of integrating those together, right? So could you talk a little bit about like kind of how you've made the choices to keep things kind of working closely together and walling the garden a little bit versus considering partnerships with people? I mean, I don't know what kind of offers people are making or whatever, but in terms of, tech development, you could decide to try and integrate more or less. So I was hoping you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. First, my background, prior to starting WAGS, I was the founder CEO of Nitro Security, and we sold our company to Intel Security, which is now part of McAfee. So my background in security is pretty pretty deep and strong. And when we started WAGS, we built it from the ground up with a highly secure environment in mind, because anything that has a GPS functionality can geolocate your pet, but theoretically you as well. And there's just a number of things. We're handling people's payments. We're handling their a lot of personal information. A lot of data is being collected. So security is really important in our world. And as people deploy these technologies, they want them to interoperate with the rest of their smart home. For instance, if you've got an alarm system in your house, most people have to turn off the motion detectors because they have a pet. And so it kind of defeats a big part of that security that you would otherwise get. So wouldn't it be great if your security system was pet aware and knew that you had a pet and would not alarm, but if somebody else broke in, it would alarm. And so these are the kinds of things we're working with other partners on how to, kind of integrate the WAGS collar into their environment so that it interoperates. Another example is we're working on a smart dog door, and if you have a fire, it'd be great if the door would unlock automatically so the pet could leave. Likewise, that kind of pet door could also be a portal for package delivery. So if your UPS driver or Amazon driver pulls up, they could show the camera the barcode, and if you were expecting a package, it would unlock and let the package in. So there's a lot of interesting kind of interoperabilities that are super important. And our goal is to make our customers, not just have smart products, but we kind of look at it as a connected lifestyle. It's more about solving problems for them, but doing it in a highly secure way that protects their privacy and their overall safety.
Yeah, so there's a really targeted question from the audience actually right on this too. What communication protocols are you guys using, and kind of why did you decide on using? I think you just use LTE, right?
So our dog collar is actually pretty complex. It's got Bluetooth, Wi-Fi,
Oh wow, okay.
NFC, and cellular. So there's a lot going on inside, and it's the size of a matchbox. So if you can think about cramming everything that's kind of in an iPhone down into a dog collar that has to be bite-proof and waterproof to boot, it's quite a challenge. And you also don't have the battery capacity that you would in an iPhone because it's on a miniature scale. So being able to optimize all those technologies and have the technology work and work over a long period of time is a real technical challenge. So yeah, we use a lot of all the modern Wi-Fi technologies or wireless technologies.
That's right. I didn't realize y'all had a bunch of radios in there. That's really interesting. So another follow-up question, because smart collars are cool. Why wouldn't we ask a bunch of questions about it? Audience is wondering about multifamily and how you could see the apartment living interaction with building management systems, things like that. Like how can this help my pet that lives in an apartment, my urban pets?
Right. So I'm going to speak about our product, the Freedom 2020, the Freedom Dog Collar. It's not just about containment or living on a big farm or a big piece of property. It has a lot of health and wellness features in it as well. So people care about, how their dog is sleeping, how is their dog exercising, what kind of calories is it burning, how much distance does it travel. We even measure companion time, how much time you're spending with your dog. And what's really interesting is we're using Alexa and the voice tools differently than most companies. Most companies just use them like, Alexa, turn on my lights, or Alexa, play a song. What we're doing is all this data we're collecting on the dog, we're turning it around and we're giving your dog a voice through Alexa. So you could say, Alexa, how did my dog do today? And Alexa will come back and say, dog ate 500 calories, slept 6 hours, but you didn't spend any time with it. You need to spend more time with your dog. Of course, it doesn't sound exactly like that, but you get the point. Is we're trying to bridge this gap between human and pet communication using data and Alexa voice skills to allow you to kind of understand your dog's behavior. And that can be done in an apartment or, in any setting. And these are kind of valuable features that people really like.
Great. Okay, so you're thinking of smart spaces, which is a great opportunity for me to plug. Next week we're going to have a conference about smart spaces. We're going to focus on multifamily and small commercial to talk about how kind of connected devices work there too. And I wanted to, in addition to plugging that, also kind of pose a question to Rebecca. When you guys are looking at new opportunities, are you considering, the downstream effects in terms of who's going to buy the products? Is like whether it's specifically going to work in single family or whether multifamily, and kind of where is your interest? Where, to what extent do you see opportunities in one type of smart space versus the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think kind of taking a step back, the first thing we're looking at is it B2B, B2C, what are the sales channels, like what are the lead generations, and then double clicking into that, looking at kind of the contract structure and how strong is that revenue. If you are selling it on a recurring basis, like how quickly can customers kind of cancel, like how baked in is the revenue kind of for the year, and looking at things like cancellation clause, like where is there room to upsell and create kind of either new revenue streams or enhance the product in different ways. So I think there's a couple different areas that we kind of focus on, but I would say a lot of the diligence would be looking at the different kind of contract structures and really who is that end user going to be.
Great, thanks. Also, producer Rosie, could you show me the funding question while I'm talking to Rebecca about funding? Rosie, my co-host on the Connected Consumer podcast, is helping me with the teleprompter right now, and she says, trying to get new funding from new tech seems to be mostly successful, but then having the technology be incorporated into new products seems to be a huge challenge. Does anyone have any comments on best practices of getting sales once you're introducing new tech? So I was wrong in thinking that was actually about funding. There we go.
Well, I can pipe in if you like.
Thanks.
Whenever you are trying to launch a brand or a new product, for instance, what we did is we started direct to consumer. We found some influencers and other people that could evaluate the product and give good reviews, because today everything is very review driven. And we went to various trade shows as well, including Consumer Electronics Show. But in our industry, we have something called Super Zoo and the Global Pet Expo. And it was so innovative that a lot of the mainstream stores came through and really wanted to carry the product. And so, just exposing the brand through those kinds of trade show organizations, and definitely having a strong influencer marketing campaign is a great way to get started.
Right. So, Bob, I think we were talking about socials a little bit when we were kind of prepping for this call. Could you talk a little bit about kind of your strategy for finding partners in sales through social media?
Yeah, so my go-to is LinkedIn, and I sort of ended up there more by default than by design. And the one unique thing that accelerated my learning big time with LinkedIn was I joined some industry groups and followed people that were buying, lending into, or otherwise involved in the multifamily space. And there was a particular individual in there that ran a challenge where for 10 days, he would literally have probably 20 groups of 10 people that were curious and interested about learning how to maximize their personal brand or their corporate brand on LinkedIn. And so it was sort of a 10-day sprint with a particular challenge where you had to learn how to create engaging content. And then from there, I've just developed the whole toolkit of tips, tricks, essentially on how to work the algorithm. And at the same time, try and sort of express an interest in helping and supporting others. And it all came primarily during COVID, and up in Canada, our lockdown was a lot further extended. So the risk of trying new stuff and people being open to collaborating was much greater. So the timing was sort of neat as well. So I just sort of tried to jump on that bandwagon and continued to support it. And the phrase that I heard a little while ago that I love is your LinkedIn page or your LinkedIn profile or how you show up there is like a 24/7 trade show. So it's your opportunity to always be telling your story. And if you support others in telling their story, it's kind of reciprocal. And so I'm part now of a community that just wants to help others in that same community. And so that element of it, I probably get more from indirect referrals and supports from my LinkedIn community than from people cold calling and say, hey, Bob, I want to buy your stuff.
Oh, that's great. That's really cool. I like how you said fell into it by default, as if you were like, I really wanted to do TikTok, but instead I have to do LinkedIn. I'm glad you found what works. And that's good.
Yeah.
That's good advice for the audience too. Certainly Parks Associates has a presence that's pretty strong. Elizabeth Parks, like a LinkedIn celebrity. Whenever we go to conferences and stuff, everyone's always recognizing her by face. And then I'm trying to get some attention right next to her. But okay, Rebecca, I found the question that's actually for you. Rosie queued it up for me. We got it. When thinking about investing in these areas, how important is the management team given execution, is important to all this? How do you look at the revenue models, and what are you looking at in terms of what's most important when you're deciding where to invest?
Okay, let's see if I can get all of that in my answer.
Okay. Yep.
First of all, on the management team, that is really important, especially kind of at the early stage. We tend to see the founders kind of acting as the CEOs and looking at kind of repeat entrepreneurs who have had a track history of exits or successful companies. That's a really great indicator. And then it's also looking at if you've raised kind of institutional funding and looking at the board composition and kind of the influence at the board level. And then on the revenue model side, maybe thinking a bit of the hardware as a service versus one-time sales. Thinking about the kind of subscription nature of the revenue and how kind of sticky is it? Like, are these customers signing up for annual contracts and paying each month, or can they cancel within 5 days if they don't like it? One of the things that we've found that a lot of companies do is kind of the pilot stage, and then have the pilot stage have an auto conversion to a full contract. And we've seen that be really successful. So once your company kind of hits the end of its, say, 30-day trial, there's an auto conversion. So there's not that room of negotiation or kind of unwillingness to convert to a full-time contract. And then thinking about kind of the payment dates and how much you want to kind of charge for your customers relative to how much you're spending on the hardware. So thinking about how long it's going to take to pay back the hardware relative to kind of the lifetime value of your customer.
All right, great. I think the audience will be very happy to hear that additional advice. One more thing. So we kind of started off because Tom is here talking about Matter. We talked about integration a couple terry, a little bit here. And I mentioned that we talk about the tech giants too much, but I still feel like I have to mention them a little bit, at least. Terry, I'd like to kind of put this to you. The tech giants, clearly have enormous resources. They can move into any space that they want. You mentioned also some other big companies that work in kind of adjacent spaces, like Purina making a collar feels a little bit weird, but they have the money if they wanted to do something that feels like they could. So I was hoping to get your perspective on what role the tech giants can play in terms of potentially moving into your space, and kind of what is your kind of role in kind of either working with them or kind of fending off the incursion a little bit. Oh, you're muted.
Apologize for that. Typically, the bigger players don't innovate that much in this area. They're looking for the emerging companies to kind of have the death battle and see which ones emerge out of that as successful companies. Especially early, this space in general is only 2 or 3 years old, maybe 4 years old. So what we're seeing is a lot of acquisition activity. And for instance, Mars acquired a pet tracker called Whistle. They paid about $118 million back in 2019 for a company that was doing $3 million in revenue. And there's been that kind of activity. Lately, there's been a lot of investment. I think last year there was 4 big financings, all at with GPS type tracker companies, Phi, Tractive, and Halo, and each one of those had a valuation of 300 million plus in that deal. So there's definitely starting to get some attention by the financial community in the space. I think people are recognizing the pet space is resistant to inflation concerns. People put their pets ahead of themselves, and during COVID, there was such a dramatic increase in the number of pets that it just created a lot of opportunity for people, financial people, to pay attention to this space. Did I answer the question? I almost forgot what the question was, Chris. I apologize.
I was like, what about tech giants? And you.
Yeah. So for us, for instance, we really are innovative, and we created an auto replenishment system, for instance. And Amazon came by our booth when we were at CES a few years ago, and they saw that what we were doing, and they convinced us that we should work together with them. And so we actually had the first fully autonomous self-ordering appliance of any type. And we incorporated their technology at the time called Amazon Dash. And that was a way where kind of what we're trying to do is in the pet industry, the food part of that $100 billion is about 40%. And a lot of people hate going to the store and carrying 40 pounds of food home, and so we're trying to automate that with a device that's aware of what you have for inventory in your home. And when you get low, we'll automatically reorder the food. And we get a percentage of that reorder as a fee. And so those are the types of ways we're working with, like Amazon's of the world, Chewy's of the world. And there's other integrations right now. I can't really give it all away, but we're working with a big wireless provider, broadband provider in the home, with a new way of connecting in your neighborhood. So there's just a ton of interest in the space by the big guys, and I think they're looking to kind of see who emerges as the big players, and then they'll make the acquisition.
All right, that's great. Well, Terry, I hope you get to make a $1 billion exit, and we never hear from you again because you buy an island and move away or something like that. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's been a really informative session. I would encourage everyone in the audience to kind of connect to and reach out to our participants here. I see a bunch of like very specific questions about WAGs, as if this is like a WAGs FAQ. You should buy his stuff, but also you can learn about it on the website. Also, Rebecca doesn't want to just give you money. That's not how this works. But still connect to people, connect to us. So I want to thank everyone on the panel today. Thank everyone in the audience for joining us, and tell you to please keep in touch. Thank you.
Connected consumers, thanks for tuning in today. We're getting ready to enter the new year, and if you would like more information on Parks Associates executive conferences, please visit www.parksassociates.com/events. And as always, we want your feedback, so please feel free to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet at us. My Twitter handle is @RosieLPinocera. Chris's is @CWhiteInsights, and our Parks Associates Twitter handle is just @Parks Associates. So please reach out and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear next.